Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. I will be your host. This is the Leadership Toolkit. As you know, we go live every Wednesday right here at 12:05 p.m. Mountain Time, 2:05 Eastern, so that we can have candid conversations with awesome leaders from all over the map, from multiple different verticals of business, so that we can bring to you their growth and learning experiences. You can learn from their successes. Sometimes we talk about failures and how they've overcome them so that you don't have to. The biggest thing is so that you're growing and you're growing the people around you. So I have an absolutely phenomenal guest today, JM Ryerson. He's a leadership and performance coach. He's an international speaker, host of the Let's Go Win podcast. He has sold multiple businesses. He's an author of Let's Go Win, Champions Daily Playbook, and Upgrade. And he's been building companies and sales teams and leaders for over 20 years. I am stoked to bring to you today, Mr. JM Ryerson. Thanks for joining me today on the show, man.
Hey, Mike, how you doing, brother? Thanks for having me. I'm blessed to be on your show, and I love the intro. Leadership is one of my favorite subjects, so I love talking about it, and I'm excited.
Absolutely. I'm just as excited. So if you would do me a favor, JM, and share a little bit, take 2 or 3 minutes, share your background, where you come from, what's your leadership experience, maybe some of those companies that you bought and sold. I think that's pretty amazing. And if you would just share that with the audience, and let's get into jamming about leadership today.
Yeah, man. A kid that grew up in Montana that I was an athlete, played basketball in college, blew out my knee for the third time, and next thing I know, I'm studying abroad in the Netherlands and no longer identifying as an athlete, if you will.
Sure.
The only reason I guess that was important is when I came back home to Montana, I was just still had the travel bug, and I ended up in California with my truck and a backpack, and I stayed essentially and grew my first 3 businesses in California in the financial service world. And it was really awesome. I learned really fast what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And what I figured out my skill set was really leadership and building teams. So don't ask me any financial service questions. I won't know the answers, or I probably won't know the right ones. But I was pretty good at building teams. And so we did that. And then I wrote that first book you mentioned, Let's Go Win, actually for my wife and I have 2 sons. We have 17 and 13, 17 and 14, my goodness, 14-year-old sons. And it started me on what Let's Go Win has turned into today, which is really, I wrote it to inspire them to live their best lives. And the lady I was working with said, "Man, you are selfish." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "If you only share this book with 2 human beings, you're selfish." Okay, cool. Published the book, and it just launched us into what I do today, which is coaching, consulting, podcasts, as you mentioned, and really just working with people on living their best lives.
I love that, man. I think people get lost. It's easy to get lost with so much coming at us every day and so forth. And so when you close there by saying people living their best lives, I think that's really, really important in today's environment. And I love the fact, I think it's amazing that it is valuable to share that message with more than 2 people. And I think so often there are many people just like that. I mean, I've been there. I shared with you, I wrote a devotional last year, and same way, I had my best friend said, "Dude, you've got to publish this." And it was like, I was jotting the stuff down for me. He says, "How can you keep that inside you?" And so I think that's just phenomenal. And you obviously have a great story and a great perspective on that. Before we get too far into it, because I do this for anybody that is tuning into the show, and if you're listening on the audio especially, you can connect with JM at letsgowin.com. That's LETSGOWIN.com. And then all of the stuff that we're talking about, Let's Go Win, and on his socials and so forth, the podcast and so forth, it's LETSGOWIN, win like winning, not let's go in, just to be clear, to make sure I'm enunciating properly. So do me a favor. One of the things that you were talking about, and you're talking about Let's Go Win and people living their best lives. And one of the items that was shared with me in the email we exchanged is talking about people upgrading themselves. And I think so often we live this, we as the collective, right? The collective people get into that daily rut of, okay, I get up, I go to work, I do the thing, I come home from work, I'm engaged in this sort of mundane life. So when you say upgrade yourself first, what are people, where would you start for somebody to live their best life? Where would you start for someone to upgrade themselves?
Yeah, man, it's a big question. And I say that because it took me 20 some odd years to figure this out. I,
Sure.
as a coach, tried to change people. Well, here's the deal: people don't like change. Newsflash, if you ask 100 people in a room, 90% don't like change, they resist it. And for years, I was trying to change them, and you could feel the resistance. The moment I said, "Hey, what about an upgrade?" I realized that people love upgrading, whether you're upgrading on an airplane or at a rental car or at a hotel. It's a change, but it's an upgrade. And I think the reason is, Mike, is because when people look at you're trying to change me, it's like there's something wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with anyone. The way you are is authentic. That's the beautiful part of you. Could we upgrade? We all can, because we do get stuck in our rut or this mundane thing and we forget what really drives us. Maybe we've thrown on a mask. And so, to answer your question directly, how do I start with how to upgrade? The basics is taking care of yourself first every single day. So, taking care of your mind, your body, and your soul. Now, for me, it's about 2.5 hours of a morning routine. Way
Okay.
too much. I promise you, I don't coach anybody, any of my clients, to do that because it's way too much. But what I do coach is 5 minutes for your mind, 5 minutes for your body, and 5 minutes for your soul. Because when I ask people, hey, what did you do for yourself today? Often the answer is, well, I took care of the kids, the house, the dog, the car, the job, the email. It's this litany of stuff. And I'm like, no, 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 no. How did you take care of you? How can you show up as your best self if you're not filling up that cup? So if you're really looking to upgrade, I would start that simply: is what am I doing to really, educate my mind, to continue to grow my mind. We
Hmm.
all know about moving our body. It's not the first time, it won't be the last time you hear people say, hey, the body's meant to move. If positive things happen, the hormones are going in a positive way, it gets you happy. And then lastly, your soul, which I see behind you, you had a cross. That might
Hmm.
be your thing. Some people it could be for, hiking a mountain. Some people it could be walking on the beach. For me, it's meditation.
Hmm.
And it doesn't really matter how you fill those buckets, just making sure that you do that before you put on any other hats in life.
That's an awesome way to explain it. Mind, body, soul, the 5 minutes, that's simple. I've heard it said before, and I really want people to grasp this. And for people, I'm a note taker. So like even during the show, you'll see me take look down because I'm jotting notes down. I learn as much from my guests as I do, listening to other podcasts. And I think it's just phenomenal. When, if you think about it, I think you put it in a good perspective that we don't take care of ourselves. We take care of all this other stuff. And if you break it down to the most simplistic way for that upgrade, that mind, body, and soul, what occurred to me, we've been doing a lot of traveling in our family lately. My daughter's a competitive gymnast, and so we've been traveling. And it's like the flight attendant, right? They always tell you put your mask on first and then help the other people. Because if you don't save yourself, everybody, then anything else is lost. And so that's where my mind went, just because I've heard it over and over again the last few weeks. And so, yeah, you do have to upgrade, or I like the word upgrade rather than change. I really like that also because um, I just think that that puts it in perspective. Because the other thing that I caught a hold of is when you're saying you have to upgrade something, what's the one thing that's consistent? If you're going to upgrade a flight, if you're going to upgrade your blinds in your house, if you're going to upgrade your computer system, any of those upgrades, and you gave several examples, what's the one thing that's consistent across all of those? There's a cost, right? And I think if you say, oh, hey, do you want to change? Yeah, there's still a cost, certainly. But when you're saying upgrade, you're saying, well, yeah, but I'm paying on in, time, in dollars and whatever. I'm using this cost, but ultimately I'm going to end up with something better. So I think that's really a great point. Um, So when you say five, five for mind, five for body, five for soul, what can you get done in 5 minutes? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Where do you start on those, each of those?
It is different for everybody, but a couple of examples. To educate ourselves further or fill our mind, whether
Hmm.
it's 5 minutes of a podcast, 5 minutes reading a book, 5 minutes doing brain games, it really doesn't matter. It's just really executing and exercising that mind, because I believe the human body is one of two ways. We're either growing or we're decaying. There is no like, I'm just going to stay here. Like, that's just not the way it works, unfortunately. Your body is going one
True.
of two ways, including your mind. So, specific to the mind example, I do brain games, I do reading, I do a lot of journaling. And so, podcasts obviously is a huge part of what we do. 5 minutes of the body, I just tell my clients, get a sweat. Just find 5 minutes to stretch or get a sweat for yourself, because even if you're not doing any exercise, that 5 minutes is that much better for you. Because here's the other trick, by the way. When you do 5 minutes, typically end up doing more, because you're reading a book and you're like, oh my gosh, 5 minutes, I don't want to put this book down. Next thing you know, it's a half hour. Same thing with exercise, same thing with your soul. So uh and the soul piece, like I said, some people it's reading the Bible, and for me it's just meditation. It's such a huge part of my life. But one point I want to make sure that we don't forget, and this really does tie back into leadership: how can you show up as the best version of yourself? How can you lead anybody else if you didn't lead yourself to begin with? And so
Sure.
that's why I tell people, like, look, man, the emails will be there, the social media will be there, all of that will be there. I promise by the time you get to work, it'll be there so you can go handle business then. You need to really pour into yourself so you can show up as that best leader. And so often people think of it the other way, like, no, I'm going to be so selfless and I'm going to take care of everyone else first. And your airplane example is perfect. If you do that, you're not showing up as the best leader. They're not getting the best version of you. So ultimately, your leadership skills and the way you perform suffers.
Absolutely. When you're talking about too, showing up as the best version of you, that was what you said, and that was one of the things that you mentioned. Let me, before we get into this, when we talk about leaders and leadership, what's your definition? Because one of the things when I get into this, and I know a lot of us could say, well, that's really simple. But one thing I found in interviewing, several hundred people over the years, is sometimes people's definition is a little bit different. What is your definition, JM, of being a leader or leadership?
Sure. So I'm going to give you two answers. One is the definition for me. It's from John Maxwell. I think he
I love
nailed
it.
it. Yeah, leadership is influence. That's all it is at the end of the day. Now, my leadership philosophy for me personally is it's
Hmm.
not about me. So that's what I take into all the companies that I've been a part of is, and if you work with me for 2 minutes, you're going to hear me say it's not about me. Now, the interesting part of that is, well, if it's not about you, why do you spend 2.5 hours on yourself? I spend 2.5 hours on myself every morning so that I can show up as the best version for you. But yeah, man, Maxwell, I think he just, for me, when I read that years and years ago, I said, that's just so profound and so clear. And just, he nailed it. So that's my
Hmm.
definition.
I love it. I carry the same one. It's simple, concise, and clear. It's right on. When you're saying, I want to go back here for just a second too. When you're talking 2.5 hours, do you do those same things? Like you spend what, 45 minutes on mind, 45 minutes body, 45 minutes. So what's your breakdown? I'm curious.
Yeah, man, it's quite a bit. So the first thing is I do my gratitude practice before I get out of bed. If my wife's awake, I'll say it aloud. If she's not, then I'll say it in my head. So before that left foot hits the ground, three things I'm grateful for, and that kind of starts me off on my path. Immediately thereafter, I'm into my breath work. So that's about 11 to 15 minutes, depending on the day. After that, then I'll go into either mantras or my meditation or journaling. It really depends what I feel called to in the moment. Then I have an 11 minutes of yoga that I do. Then I'm into working on my body. I use a tonal typically at home is the majority of what I'm doing every morning. And then we start getting into some of the reading, brain games, because now I'm awake. Now I'll actually get to the cell phone a little bit and start to do some of that. After that, my goodness. Then it's the dog is about to be woken up, so I'm taking care of the dog and the kids. So there's a little moment where my morning routine gets a little broken up, and then after that, I come back and whatever I haven't finished up, including fueling my body, then I start to get into that. But all told, it's around 2.5 hours. My
Sure.
wife has asked me many times, we need to shorten this, and I agree with her. But here's the trick. I don't know how I would shorten it. I love it because of how I feel. And so could I be more efficient? I'm sure I could, but I've just found for right now in this season of life, it just feels so good. I don't know what I'd take out or shorten.
Well, and if it works, it works, right? I mean, even like right now, you and I having a conversation, I can feel the energy through the camera. Like you just got good energy, man, coming to the show. So you put it out there. And so one of the things that you talked about too is, when we're talking about leadership and leadership as influence, what are some other qualities that you believe every single leader should possess?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I've written several blogs on this. So it's so funny because in one moment I'm like, I want these leaders to have all these attributes, and then over here, I think if I were to break it down, the
Hmm.
three that I absolutely you have to have, one is humility. I think the majority of leaders, when I reflect back on how they performed,
Hmm.
if their ego got in the way, typically that's their downfall. And we've seen countless examples of people that were way up there. Lee Iacocca is one that I always see right in my mind, where he was exalted, he was the man, and because of that ego, it ended up being his downfall. So humility's one.
Sure.
Confidence is a second. Confidence to make those tough decisions. Confidence to lead. Confidence to have the integrity, which make the hard decisions that sometimes we don't want to make. And then
Hmm.
lastly is communication. And that's what I loved in your intro. You mentioned communication, and it's one of those subjects that we talk about it, but it's still so needed in every organization. I will say with 100% certainty, there's not a company out there that doesn't need to work on the communication. Every single one. It's because if we stop working on it, that's when we
Hmm.
start to have some real challenges. And actually, Charles Duhigg's book that just came out, which I'm a huge fan of, Super Communicators. It's fascinating, man. It's one of those reads where I'm like, if you haven't read his stuff, I think he's become one of my favorite authors,
What
and
was the
I'm
name of
just
that? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what was the name? I'm gonna drop that in the comments here.
oh sure, super communicators I think is the term. I say that, and I can see the title, but yeah, super communicators. It's he's just so good.
And who was it
Um,
by? What was the author?
Charles Duhigg, Duhigg. He wrote The Power
Do
of Habit. He
Okay.
wrote Smarter, Smarter, Faster, Better, I think it was. Anyway,
If you
his second
combined
one,
it, it's smatter. That's perfect.
Smatter. That's not super communicating right there.
Right. So here's a couple things I want to dive into each of these because you said humility, confidence, communication. Uh, when we talk about humility and being humble, how can a leader portray that? What are some things, examples?
It's a great question. So there's small ways that you can do it. For instance, any of my teams, if I take them out to eat or if they come over and we're having and Cynic wrote a book called Leaders Eat Last.
Hmm.
I did this way before that book had come out, but I always feel like I'm a servant leader and therefore I want them to be taken care of. It's a very small example, but it's a simple act where it's like, no, please, you please go first. You put in so much work. I recognize the amazing things that you're doing. Just please, I want you to go first, or if I can, I'll even serve them if I have the ability to
Sure.
in the moment. Um, really always making sure that you're not taking credit for something that is not yours. Now, here's the crazy thing. This is where leaders, oh man, it drives me crazy. When you give love and recognition to
Hmm.
your team, which by the way, Gallup had a poll, 71% of employees are currently disengaged. And the number one reason is lack of recognition. So if you as a leader in any way, shape, or form take that recognition away from your team, you are destroying the trust that you have. And it's such a crazy thing. And here's the other thing. If you give that love and recognition, tenfold it will come back to you. Now, don't do it for that reason. Do the
Sure.
recognition to the team because they deserve it. But just know it will come back to you so much greater than if you took that. So that's one of the big ones, Mike, where I just want to like, no, please don't take that recognition from your team. They earned it, they deserve it.
Right. Well, and I think that's super powerful. A good buddy of mine, Leadership with Mike. It's not my channel. He, just to be clear, Mike Ashley, he says it's called common decency, allowing your guests or your team to go first. Problem is, it's not always common anymore. And I think part of that maybe stems. I blame a lot on social media, JM, because it's like it's necessary, it's good, it allows us to be connected, but there's sort of this false sense of connection. You brought up communication. We'll dive into that in a minute, because social media, it's like it's so easy. I mean, I reached out to you the other day. All of a sudden, bam, we're sitting talking, and you you have this illusion that everybody's got a voice, everybody's got to hear this conversation, everybody needs to hear what I have to say. So it becomes this look at me environment. And I agree with you. The best leaders, it's not about look at me. It's like, look what the team did. Look what this person did. And I think it's such a just down to earth example to say, hey, just feed the team first. And I jokingly, lovingly also, I say, will say with my team, they're like, oh, hey, could we do this? Or hey, could we do that? Or would you get us this? And I'm like, listen, guys, I pay in high fives and hugs. You can't take it out of the ATM, but it's still, there's still value there. And just by acknowledging that and saying that, usually I'll get someone that's like, all right, high five, and it's valuable. That little piece of acknowledgement is so valuable to people,
Well,
because it is real human interaction versus on a computer screen somewhere. What are you gonna
yeah,
say?
man, like 20 years ago, they did a study on NBA teams and they could
Hmm.
determine who was going to go to the playoffs based on the amount of high fives. It was fascinating, brother. Like they literally, of the teams that went, they were 80% accurate. These teams are going to go, these teams aren't, not based on talent, not based on roster, not based on how much money they had paid, based on high fives and synergy. When I saw that, I was
I
like,
love it.
it's so clear what you just said and so spot on. And here's the thing, it costs $0 for your company, for the company you work for, who however that looks like, and the returns are incalculable.
I love that. The dive in, let's dive into the second leadership quality. You brought up confidence. And it's easy for us to say, like, somebody's maybe watching the show or listening, you can hear it in your voice, certainly. Hopefully people can hear it in mine. It's like, hey, we've been doing this, we're having this conversation, and like you're very strong with the opinions and the confidence, the way you present. And we've all seen a leader that we go, man, they're powerful and they're confident, they're so good. And there's this expectation that because once you've made it into leadership, you have influence, or maybe you have the title. I know leadership is not a title, but that's often where it starts, right? You get that manager tag on the business card, and it's just expected. Well, they're supposed that now they know everything. Now they're super
Mm.
confident, right? And again, looking, I've been there. I remember looking at people. I have to imagine maybe early on in your career, you look and go, man, they just got it all. They got it all figured out. This is so awesome. How can someone start if they're moving into a leadership role? Say they're getting promoted at work, or they're starting to, maybe they're an entrepreneur starting to build their own business, and they've got two or three team members. How can they, I'm going to ask this two parts. How can they start to learn to confidence? And then two, how can they display that confidence? Maybe one or two actions that they can take to display the confidence without coming off as arrogant or egotistical.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And let me just say, not any leader, newsflash, no one knows everything, not even close. And it is one of those things where, as if you're a new leader, one of the best things you can say is, I don't know. I don't know. And you know what? We'll figure it out together. Does anybody on my team know that answer? Because if you do, bring it to the forefront. But to get to your point with confidence, you have to earn that confidence within your team. And the best way to do that is to really dive in with them, get to know who they are, what drives them, and then get them to build in the trust with you so that now you have a vision that's built. Their vision, your vision needs to be big enough that their vision fits inside of it. And now you should have the confidence to say, look, guys, here's where we're going. As a team, we can accomplish this. And one of my favorite quotes is, no, it's amazing what can be accomplished if no one cares who gets the credit. And if you think about that, yeah, going back to the humility piece, it actually gives you confidence because it's never all on you as a leader. Never. You can go from Steve Jobs to Elon Musk to, some of the biggest leaders with those big personalities that we've seen. It's not all on them, by the way. And they'll be the first to tell you that. Steve Jobs was famous for hiring people that he thought were so much smarter than he was, so much brighter to take his vision to the place that it needed to be. He had great confidence in his vision, but he had great confidence in the execution of his team. And so if you have the proper team around you, and what I mean by that is people that really have bought into you, really have bought into the vision, you're clear on the cultural values of why you stand for one another, what we're doing, how we behave. Well, it's real easy to be confident and say, this is where we're going, guys. And we're going to get there together. We're going to win together. We're going to lose together. That's just the way it goes. And when you can do that and you can own that, look in the mirror and say, it's on us as a team. And by the way, if the team screws up, guess who's going to take that? You are going to take that because you are responsible for that. And when the team wins, you're going to give credit to your team. And that's part of the thing that I think some leaders don't, that scares them to say, wait a minute, I want to get the credit. Well, if your team is winning, I promise you, you will get the credit. Just don't take it from them. So I hope that answered your question. But when it comes to confidence, it really does start internally. So what we had talked about earlier with the morning routines, all of that is so you can really fill that bucket. If I committed to doing 2.5 hours or an hour, if I see that through, well, already I've knocked off one thing. I committed to it. I made it. I saw it through. I have confidence that I can do anything moving forward the rest of the day.
I love it. I hear two things that stand out to me as you're speaking. And I know, listen, I know, folks, if you're listening, I repeat the stuff sometimes. One, I want to be clear on what I'm hearing, and it helps me learn it. Like I said, when I'm going through it, when you're talking about confidence, I think it is really valuable. What you just pointed out there at the end is that you're true to yourself. Like, I made the commitment to me and I fulfilled that commitment. And that's in your brain, psychologically, that's a little win. And our brain likes wins, and wins build confidence. You said so much good stuff in there that was fantastic, and I jotted down a few notes. I want to cover just quick. We got a few comments here. We are talking about relationships earlier. Lead with Jim said authentic relationships are hard to find. How we engage in activities and events or it's hard to find. We now engage in activities and events and call it a relationship. So just because there's a difference between having an engagement with somebody and building a relationship. And then also Jim says here, repetition creates permanence. And so I think that's a valuable statement, because like you're saying, hey, I do this every single day, and your brain sees that win because I'm congruent and consistent with myself. That's a win. They see it every day. So that builds permanent in your confidence. Two other things that stood out that are just super strong. I love the quote, right? It's amazing what can be accomplished when no one gets the credit. I think it's Reagan. Wasn't it Reagan that said that? It's been attributed to.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of the presidents. And I can't remember. Honestly, as I said, I'm like, gosh, who said that? But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's one of them.
I think it was Reagan. And then this is valuable. And I would tell anybody listening to the show, watching the show, where you said you have to have a vision that's big enough for their visions to fit inside it. You have to be able to support that team with that vision. It has to be so big that they can get on board and they can get in behind. I like that is such a cool statement, such a cool. I don't know if that's a quote from somewhere else. If not, I'm attributing it to you because I think that's fantastic. Um, there's so I don't know which one to go with next because I got two other great questions written, or I think they're great questions. Let's talk about, because you said in here, in gaining confidence and moving forward in leadership and in business, one of the things you commented just in this last little bit was when you build the proper team, we're able to get there.
Mm.
Now, I actually, you didn't say build. You said when you have the proper team, we're able to get there. So how do you build the proper team, create the proper team? Do you buy the proper team? How, when it comes to team building specifically, uh, where do you start?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. So, one thing that Lead with Jim said about the relationships, and I saw this a lot with COVID and the pandemic, people did, it became somewhat transactional because we weren't heart to heart, human to human
Yes.
in the workplace. And so often people lost sight of it, just became a number. Yeah, Mike was just a number producing X, and Mike's supposed to do this, and Tom over here and Sarah over here. They're supposed, and instead of actually getting to know what drove Mike and Tom and Sarah, what's important to them, why are they even at this job that they're in 33% of their life? So I loved what he said because it did become that way. And it's so, we have to be intentional as leaders to make sure we genuinely care about the person that's on our team. Um, Specific to finding the right team, creating the right team, you even mentioned buying the right team. And if
Mm-hmm.
anybody's a baseball fan, you're watching the Dodgers this year, you've seen the Yankees try this before, where it is a huge payroll and a huge letdown at the end of the year because they don't necessarily have the proper players. And
Mm-hmm.
if you go back and you look at, I believe in what Jim, oh my goodness, Daniel Pink, excuse me, said in Drive, result only work environment. And if you sticking with the baseball thing, if you go back to Moneyball and you look
Mm-hmm.
at how Billy Bean built that team, it was based on performance and them actually fitting into the culture of what this team was all about. So, how do you create it? You have to get intentional and clear. What is your culture? What do you expect? What do they need to have innately, and how do they show up? 99% of companies aren't clear on this. They have some mission statement on the wall, they may have some cultural values, but they don't drive that home all the time, as Lead with Jim mentioned, with repetition. You got to get clear on what your culture is. Now, when you're clear on what your culture is, now you know if you have the right players on your team. Now, are they in the right seat, and do they know where we're going? And I can see clearly as I was working with a real estate company,
Mm-hmm.
and I was told about this one executive, and we'll call him Jeff. Jeff was the biggest jerk in the world, according to everyone on the team. And I'm about 45 minutes into my hour discovery with Jeff, and he is living up to the bill, man. He is just a class ass jerk. And I finally asked him, I said, "Hey, Jeff, let me ask you, you're currently in recruiting. Do you like what you do?" And he just, "No, I don't like it. This isn't what I came here for." Blah, blah, blah. And I said, "Well, can I ask you what your background is and what you're interested in?" And he said, "Marketing. I was incredible at doing both digital marketing and some of the physical marketing." Well, guess what? This company needed marketing. We moved Jeff from recruiting into marketing. When you came through the door 6 months later, it was like Jeff was, Moses parting the Red Sea. Everyone loved the guy. He's happy as a clam, and he's no longer this jerk. Well, he was the right person. He had the right values. He was just in the wrong seat. And so it's you really have to look at what are the values we're looking for. Are you clear on expectations of what you're supposed to be doing? And are you actually good and enjoy that part of your job? And often, if the answer is no, no, and no, what can we do other than if they don't have the right values, they need to be off the team anyway. And they know it and you know it. But if they do have the right cultural values, are they in the right seat? Do they have clear expectations of what they're expected to do? And then it becomes magical because no one wants to wake up and be the worst at their job. Nobody's like, I'm going to go to work today, Mike. I'm going to be the worst employee you've
Right.
ever seen. It's never happened. Nobody's ever woken up and said that. I've seen it. I've seen really bad employees, but that's not on them, by the way. That is 100% on leadership not doing their job to make sure that they're clear on what they're doing and why.
It's really, really good stuff. Let me recap, because a couple of things that I heard you say was, being intentional. How do people show up? I love the fact that you brought up right player, right seat. And I think I've been through that myself recently. And ironically, if I was Jeff, it's so funny because my wife just said this to me is like, I've been in marketing. I got into digital marketing. And so I was behind a computer because I'm a computer nerd, right? I understand how the stuff works, build my own computers, did all this stuff, and got acknowledged for that at work. They're like, oh, well, Mike understands this stuff, so let's do that.
Mm.
And I was doing it for 7 years, and it's like I was good at it, but I was cranky often, and and we'll just call it cranky. But I feel like I was Jeff here, and so I got moved because as I was telling you, like my background is sales, right? I love hugs and high fives. I love speaking. I love sharing my knowledge to help grow other people. And so they're like, well, let's move you into this sales management position. You can grow these 5, 6, this team. And all of a sudden, literally overnight, I could feel it like, okay, there's a relief, there's an exhale, there's an attitude change and so forth. And on top of that, then it's moving the needle the right direction for the company. So I have experienced that like myself recently, which I think is amazing. And then I love where you pointed out, like, hey, what are the values? Do you have clear expectations? And are they good at it? Are they good in that spot? Here's one other thing. And if nobody's picked up on this, I'm going to point this out, JM. And I don't know that you even do this intentionally, but you do it intrinsically. The fact that most everything that JM is sharing, and I would say leaders take this to the bank. You speak in threes,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes. Why do you do that? Is that intentional?
Yeah, it's there's diminishing return after 3. So I made this mistake, Mike. I was standing on stage. We had about 1,500 people at the company. It was my second company at the time. And we had 6 core values. Now, I was one of the guys that came up with core values in the room, one of the executives, and I'm on stage and I got to 4 and my mind went blank. I couldn't remember the last 2 core values of the company.
Trying to look out of the
And
corner of your eye to see if they're on the PowerPoint, right?
totally like help. And here's the funny part. If I didn't know it, I was part of the group that came up with it. How could I expect employee number 1,500 to have any semblance of a chance? So
Yes.
since that day, we reworked them down to 3. If you were to ask the audience the year before when I did the 6 core values, not even 1% could have regurgitated the values. You went back the next year, over 90% of the people could, because it was 3. We remember 3 Amigos, Snap, Crackle, Pop, the 3 Stooges. I mean,
Red, white,
marketing
and
knows
you.
this.
I'm loving
Marketing.
it. Marketing. I was just going to bring that up. Yep. Hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet.
That's it, man. We remember these 3, red, white, and blue. I mean, you could go on for days. We remember these 3.
Yep.
So yes, I do speak in that because our brains literally after 3, there's a law of diminishing return that comes into play. So
No, and I do think that's great. I just wanted to point it out because sometimes people don't pick up on it. And as I've been writing things down, every time it's three qualities. How do you build a proper team? Three things you gave me. You got, and so I think that's valuable for anyone listening to the show to realize. And you're right. They, in psychology, I think they call it chunking. We chunk pieces of information and we chunk in threes, right? That's how our human brain works. And so often we go in and we go, well, hey, I'm a new leader at this organization, or I'm going to be managing a team, or what. I prefer leadership to management, but let's, when somebody's getting promoted, we get the title manager. We don't get the title leader. Somebody else gives that to us. And so when we come in there, so often people go, okay, well, we're going to turn this company around. And just like you said, hey, we got these 6 core values. People will come in and say, so we're going to add this 10-step process. And it's like, what the hell? How am I going to remember 10 steps? So start with 3 steps. And then once they have those mastered, you can add 3 more steps, or you can add, so I just thought that would be valuable to share and point out as we're sitting here chatting. One next question, anything to add to that before, because I'm going to shift gears on you.
I mean, here's the hard. We could talk on these subjects for so long, and it's so true. Yes, it was. So one really quick thing: the
Yeah.
6 Types of Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. If you haven't read that, Mike,
Okay.
check it out, because what you said about I'm doing marketing and I'm good at it, but I'm drained. I go home and I'm literally drained. If you take Lencioni's, there's the 6 Types of
Mhm.
Working Genius. 2 will be things that fill you up. 2 will be they're like nothing. It doesn't really get you fired up or bring you down. And 2 of them will drag you down. The challenge is, just because you're good at it doesn't mean that it fills you up. And so often, oh, you're good at that, so we're going to have you do this over and over and over. Well, what if it makes you miserable? Now you end up being this horrible employee. So anyway, it's a fascinating read. I think Lencioni is a genius. So check it out if you haven't
Yeah,
had a chance.
I have not read that book. I've read what are 5 dysfunctions of a team. I think that's Lencioni as well. So I'll have to look that up, because I agree. He's a great author. He's a great communicator. That leads me to my next question, because you brought up, and when we're talking about qualities, great qualities of a leader that every leader should possess, your third one you said is communication. How do you define communication? Because that's a broad topic.
Yeah, it sure is. It's really it's a making sure that there's a true understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. I don't think it's much more than that. It's to make it simple. If I could make it, communication is connection at the end of the day. If I were to try and do what Maxwell did, leadership is influence, I would say communication is connection. The challenge is often we think we're communicating, but if it's not being received, then nothing is actually taking place. And again, Lead with Jim had that, repetition is permanence. He's absolutely correct. I equate it to my teenage sons. If I say go clean your room one time, do you think it's being done? Not a chance. No. Like 7, 8, 9 times. Yeah, okay, dad means it this time.
Yeah. You get
That's
louder each
yeah,
time.
that's right. And now we start to come with, incentives, or, the carrot or the stick, right? Like you're going
Yeah.
to lose the phone or whatever you do. But I think that's the same idea when we're communicating our core values, or our expectations or our goals. We think because we said it once, or because it's on the board, or that oh, now they've received it. No, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that they have in day-to-day interactions and emails, and being pulled a certain way in a client and all these things. So repeating your core values every day, repeating at every meeting, repeating what we're trying to accomplish, goals are, don't be afraid to do it again and again and again. It's not boring. It's actually just making sure that we have clarity. And really utilizing that cascading communication is so key, especially as your organization grows. Because just because you said it here to your group of executives, that doesn't mean that they did a great job getting it all the way down. And so you want to make sure that you're constantly reinforcing what we're looking, here's the vision, here's where we're going. I'm not saying it's easy,
Mm-hmm.
But if you're intentional about it, it becomes easier, and it becomes so much easier, less drama, all the things, if people know where we're going and why.
And I love the fact, one other thing I picked up on, and you say a lot without saying it directly, which I think is awesome. Just the way you communicate is really valuable to me. Like I've taken in a lot. And I want to point this out to folks too. One of the things that JM said when he's talking about communication, he's talking about human interaction. We have this illusion of communication because it's like, well, I sent an email. Well, I sent him a text, but you lose a lot of context. You lose the emotion behind it. You lose the tone. You lose that actual real human connection. And that's one of the things you brought up is you're talking about going over it repeatedly in meetings with people, with them face to face, telling your sons to clean the room. I'd heard it said early on in my sales career, for anybody, and this may or may not be right, but it's worked for me and I've taken it to the bank over the years. 26 spaced repetitions for somebody to be able to learn something and develop that habit. So meaning, like you said, hey, repeat it every day. And I think probably the reason they picked 26 is normally if you're in sales, if you take weekends off or a day off each week, you have 26 other days. So if you're repeating it every day, 26 spaced repetitions. So time in between it, you're communicating, and so I think that's a really good point that you made as well. And what I heard you say is the fact that like it's real, like face to face, voice to voice communication. It's not just, hey, I dropped an email to somebody and hope to get it done.
Brother, it actually happened with us. You had sent emails that I hadn't received. How did you get me? You went through Facebook Messenger and said,
Yeah.
hey, we have a show coming up. If this doesn't get in, I can't really do the show. I didn't know that it was being sent. And this is why you're good at sales, by the way. Sent the email, didn't work. Now I tried Facebook Messenger. If that didn't work, probably would have gone to a text message or a phone call.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay, LinkedIn. And that's the thing. It's like, you don't just call, leave a message. Well, I tried to reach him, boss. Did you communicate via text? Did you literally go to their home? I mean, the $1 million mind screw is one thing I learned early in my sales career, where if I put $1 million in front of you and you needed to have 100 appointments by tomorrow, what would you do? And you go through what it would take in order to get it done. That's how you should show up every single day. That's how you want to communicate,
I love
because
that.
the $1 million is right there. If you get these 100 appointments, you get $1 million. If you don't, then you don't get the $1 million. It's one of those things that when you can break it down however you want, 10 appointments, whatever your thing is as a sales guy, but it's like that's what you would do to communicate. And so you did it perfectly in our example. Hey man, I've sent you these emails. What gives? Or you actually didn't say that, but that's how I was like, shoot, I'm so sorry. Let me figure it out. And it was over to you within, I think, 12 hours.
Yeah, less than 12 hours.
Yeah, and I didn't know you had sent the emails because it was going to my spam or whatever, or maybe I just didn't check it. I didn't put two and two together. So I love that you brought that up because it literally happened with you and I.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing it up, because and at the end of the day, if that hadn't happened for both of us, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I love the whole conversation, the energy, the fact that you and I have gotten to connect is just awesome. There's still so much we could cover. We're 50 minutes into the show, so I'll kind of wind it down here. Here's what I would just ask you openly, because I still have other stuff I could ask. We could keep going. We could do like a 4-hour seminar on this if you want. All of a sudden it's Rogan, right? So any sort of final thoughts, anything to sum it up and tie everything together that you'd like to take us out with today, JM?
I do a keynote speech, and it's called Show Up As You. And the reason I do this is, you had mentioned early in our careers, we don't necessarily show up authentically. We're trying to look a certain way. We're trying to be a certain way and sound a certain way as leaders. When you show up as your authentic self, people can get behind that. They can truly say, you know what? I'll follow that guy or gal no matter what. But if you're not truly being yourself, they won't. And I say often, masks are for parties. They're not meant for real life. And at some point, we started putting masks on to fit in, to be liked, to look like that certain leader, whatever thing that we thought we were supposed to look like. And it's all BS, man. Look, your authentic self is amazing. When you can truly show up in that, you're saving yourself so much time and energy, and that allows you to put proper energy towards being a great leader. So I would just ask people to be their authentic selves. It's so much easier than trying to be someone that you're not. And just watch, the results will follow. People will get behind who you are. And so that would be my final, Mike. And man, you ask great questions. I literally could do this with you for hours. I love the subject matter. You ask great questions. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. One more time, just in case, I'll make sure to mention, for anyone that wants to connect with JM, you can do that on his website at letsgowin.com. Also, he's on all the socials at Let's Go Win 365. And then certainly I would encourage you, man. JM comes with so much fire and just great knowledge, great information, wisdom, and leadership. I like you said, I could sit and have a conversation with you all day. So I would encourage everybody, go to letsgowinpodcast.buzzsprout.com. So, and I imagine if they Google Let's Go Win Podcast, that'll show up for them as well. So thank you, JM, for joining me today. Thank you for spending the time with me. You're awesome. I really appreciate your time and wisdom.
Thank you, brother. Keep doing it. You're amazing. I appreciate you.
Thank you. If you don't mind, just hang out in the back for a minute and I will take us out real quick. And friends, that is going to bring us to a close for another Leadership Toolkit podcast. I thank you so much. I value your time, and do me a favor. I know you gained some insights. I know you gained some actionable information from this show. If you would, throw some thumbs up on it, throw some likes, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel on YouTube it's just my name, at Mike Phillips, and share this show with someone that needs to hear this message. Maybe it's you need to bookmark it and come back and listen again. Maybe it's somebody else on your team, but the just driving force for this is to make sure that I'm able to contribute. I want you to grow, and I want, therefore, you to be able to pay that forward and grow the people around you. So I thank you so much for joining me today, everyone. And until we speak next, stay great. We'll see you next Wednesday.